Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're very excited to have you here today for our webinar, SKAdNetwork 4.0, Evolution or Revolution. Following the WWDC session from Apple last month, SKAdNetwork 4.0 video that was presents a lot of really interesting and exciting updates, and we're going to discuss them today with a panel of ecosystem experts. I'm going to go right ahead and introduce them. First is Roy Yanai, Director of Product at AppsFlyer. Over the past 5 years, Roy has led different product areas within AppsFlyer, including data exchange, analytics, and incrementality. Currently, Roy leads the product efforts for AppsFlyer's iOS solutions, and particularly for SKAN innovation. We have Margaret Ochoa joining us from the Match Group. Margaret leads digital marketing and measurement for the Match Group portfolio of dating apps, including Match, Tinder, and Hinge. Her team works across a portfolio of web and app businesses, which gives them a unique perspective on the evolving measurement and privacy landscape. Next, I'm happy to introduce Caroline Austin, also from the Match Group. Caroline leads paid acquisition for one of Match Group's newest and fastest growing segments, the Affinity app business, which includes Chispa, BLK, and Upward. She has worked across most of Match Group's portfolio of dating brands in her time at Match. She's based in Los Angeles, and when she's not growing apps, she tries her hand at growing things in her garden. Emily Tierney is joining us from Supercell. Emily is the marketing technology lead at Supercell. Emily leads a team of engineers who build tools and services that support day-to-day operations for marketing and the underlying marketing data infrastructure. In the 6 years she's been at Supercell, Emily has established the marketing technology practice, and her team has developed and owned the product vision and roadmap that launched the new growth channels. And last but not least, we are joined by Matt Ellenwood. Matt is Director of Product Management at Liftoff, where he leads product for the Vungle Direct advertising products, data products, and privacy initiatives. His ad tech experience has focused on data and performance products, including audience targeting, experimentation, and performance analytics. Prior to Liftoff, he led data products at TubeMogul, now Adobe Ad Cloud. My name is Minnie Katzenmeyer. I'm a product marketing lead at AppsFlyer, and I will be moderating today's session. Let's take a look at what's on the agenda. We're going to cover 3 main areas in our agenda today. The first is we're going to talk about the challenges that the ecosystem is still facing with the SKAdNetwork. Second, we're going to talk about the SKAdNetwork 4.0 changes and how they can be leveraged. And lastly, we'll leave some room and some time for Q&A from the audience. So without further ado, let's dive right in. We're going to start with our first question about the current challenges that the ecosystem is facing around SKAdNetwork. So I'm going to open this up to the floor. Exactly that. What challenges are you still facing with SKAdNetwork today, a year after iOS 14.5 was generally available? Do you want to kick us off, Match Group?
Sure, absolutely. We've certainly done a ton of testing across our portfolio. I think one of the benefits of working across a portfolio business is that we've been able to take a different approach across many of our apps, and we've been able to be more aggressive in some of our newer apps that we've launched, and then take those learnings and apply them across the portfolio. At the same time, despite all of the testing that we've been doing, the challenges really haven't changed for us. A large part of the marketing that we do is it's focused on lower funnel performance objectives. So driving signups, purchases, revenue, and our source of truth has always been our internal data and, of course, user level attribution. And so we've really spent the last year rethinking and evolving our measurement approach. And like I said, we've done a lot of testing. We've made some progress, but we're still in this phase of figuring out what is our measurement approach and how do we make that scalable across all of our apps, and also how does it align with the data that we get from the SKAdNetwork.
Thanks, Margaret. Emily, do you want to weigh in a little bit here as well?
Yeah, sure. I like the trivia, and you asked about the ATT frameworks and what industry was quickest to adopt to it, and it was gaming. I think, when the changes happen, everyone across gaming was really nervous about a change. And the biggest challenge we face is not getting the data as soon as it happens. Waiting for the laundering period takes time. And additionally, we also have to test different conversion value to see what best to optimize. And if you look at like platform like Facebook and Google, their recommendation was using a 24 hours window and Google said 48 hours. It's still extremely short because you're using such a little bit of data to predict like day 360 or, try to figure out your returns on investments and you is incredibly tough. And any of the data folks on the line would know that using day zero data is probably the worst indicator of your longer tail. So those are the challenges that we're still facing right now.
Thank you, Emily. What would you say that you've learned in the last year or so since iOS 14? What has surprised you, for better or for worse, 1 year on now?
Yeah, I can kick off again. I think what we learned very quickly that building a consent model doesn't work. Supercells are very, very small teams, and we have to kind of make a judgment call on what we focus on and lean in. And we did a very small test on the consent flow in one of our beta game and decided, nope, let's just best commit to a privacy-centric model because that's where the future is heading. And what we learned is that we did some, experiments on lift study and look at the organic lift and compare that to the number by SKAdNetwork. And that numbers are actually very close. So it gave our team a lot of confidence to actually lean heavy on spending on iOS when, the cost is actually lower because of the shift. So what we learned is, making that judgment call, committing to what you think where the future is going is actually the best bet for your engineering efforts.
Thank you, Emily. Roy, would you like to weigh in as well on the AppsFlyer side?
Yeah, definitely. So I think my point of view is kind of representing what we hear from the market, representing the voices. I think with regards to the last question and also coming back to what we've learned, one thing that I think surprised the industry is kind of the volatility of the null value, and not only within how Apple can have some voodoo stuff in there, but also it kind of depends on the ad network. And there has been quite a long period of optimization there, which actually makes me very optimistic about SKAN 4, because we're expected to see much less null value. So this is something very exciting about this change that we're going to discuss soon. Yeah.
Thank you, Roy. Matt, anything you'd like to add before we move on to the SKAN 4.0 updates?
Yeah, I'd echo actually the point that Roy made. Is one of the big learnings or surprises for us was just how much null we encountered and what the impact of that was. One of my largest takeaways, though, just talking with advertisers and working through these problems on our own, is just the high cost of uncertainty to the operating environment that has been introduced by this shift. And I think that's been one of the hardest things for us to all deal with is timeline, solution, definition, and just navigating the uncertainty across all of those aspects of SKAdNetwork and ATT and being rolled out. And it's been extraordinary to see the investment across advertisers and then also the other partners in the ecosystem to deal with that. I would not have estimated it as being as costly as it was beforehand, and it's been a key takeaway. And I think we're all still dealing with it.
Thanks, Matt. Great insight, guys. Let's take that and move on to SKAdNetwork 4.0 that Apple announced at WWDC. First, we're going to tackle the topic of LTV measurement. And I'm going to invite Roy to give a short, quick, sweet couple sentences explanation about the upcoming changes around LTV measurement. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think visual would be the best here. So I'm going to try. I do assume some understanding and participant have watched what Apple released, but it's important to understand a few things. One, we're going to have 3 postbacks. This is huge. And these 3 postbacks are not guaranteed. This is a fine print that I think was not emphasized enough in the video and everything released by Apple. So the first one obviously is guaranteed, and we are going to get either a conversion value of 0 to 63 or what's called coarse grain, which is low, medium, or high. Then after the second postback, there could be 2 more postbacks, and that's depending whether the user was active within these windows, and also depending, and this I am certain with 99%, not 100, but also depending on CV update, conversion value update. So even if the user was active between day 2 to day 7, but no conversion value update has happened, a second postback will not be sent. And one more thing, it could be that first postback is sent, then a user visited your app at day 34, and thus second postback is not going to be sent, third postback is going to be sent. And one more thing before I give it back to Mini, both second postback and third postbacks are going to be either coarse value, i.e. low, medium, high, or null values. So the 0 to 63 is only going to be the fine grain, is only going to be part of the first postback. So this was a really quick recap. I hope it was well understood. Back to you, Mini.
Thanks, Roy. That was quick but insightful. I'm going to open it up to the floor. How do you feel about these updates? Are you excited about them? Do you find that do you imagine that they'll be useful for you and for your measurement purposes? Let's start with Match Group.
Sure. Going back to what Roy mentioned, the null conversion values were absolutely a really big challenge for us, and it was one of the reasons why we really started pushing for internal measurement solutions outside of SKAN as a way to sort of validate the data that we were getting and to account for the null conversion data that we were getting. So I am encouraged by this update. Many of our apps still, have been challenged in terms of testing into SKAN because of the investment levels that are required to get over, to get past and to minimize the null conversions. So I am hoping that with this change, we'll just be getting more data points in general, whether it's fine or coarse grain, and it'll open up opportunity for apps to test at lower investment levels and still get, some level of even insight, even if it is coarse grain.
Thanks.
So I've seen in the chat a few requests to elaborate on what it means. I think I owe the audience just one more sentence. In the end, we're going to get a better LTV measurement. All right. What it means is that for day 1 and 2 are guaranteed. You're going to have a window of 48 hours to measure whatever you need with conversion values, either 0 to 63 or low, medium, high. But then you're also going to get LTV measurements of day 2 to 7 and 7 to 35. So you wouldn't be able to measure as much as you want. You'd be able to only measure things with conversion values low, medium, or high. All right. So for example, let me give one example to maybe make it more clear. Let's say I want to measure revenue happening between day 2 to day 7. I can map that to low, medium, and high. For example, Revenue between 0 and 4 is low. Revenue between 4 to 10 is medium, and revenue between above 10 is high. Then obviously it's not very granular, but it's much better than anything that we had before. So you would be able to map these revenue values into, for example, low, medium, or high, and you're going to get that on day 7 plus 0 to 24 hours delay. I hope that made things a bit clearer.
Thanks, Roy. And while I have your mic on, can you give us the MMP perspective to these changes to LTV measurement?
Yeah. Again, I think with regards to everything our customers and Matt were saying here, I think this is a huge differentiator than what we had from SKAN 2.0 or 3.0. LTV measurement is huge. It could be, it really varies from one vertical to another. I'm sure we have a lot of different customers here. So for example, if you're a subscription app that has subscription only on day 30, 24-hour, just like Emily was saying, 24-hour measurement doesn't give you almost anything, right? You cannot, it's very hard to predict whether a user is going to subscribe based on 24 hours of activity. So this is huge. And from our point of view, specifically AppsFlyer, where we came up with a single source of truth solution to unify both SKAN and AppsFlyer attribution into one and creating model LTV based on that. This is going to be a huge addition because these are going to be inputs into the model to give us an accurate, granular reporting.
Thanks, Roy. How about the ability to lower conversion values, which has been introduced for SKAdNetwork 4.0? This one's for you too, Roy, but guys, feel free to.
All right. Yeah, I think it's great. I think the main value for it is going to be predictions. You might want to lower your prediction, right? Because revenue keeps accumulating, but then prediction could actually decrease how you rank, how you give the score to that user. So I think this is really cool on that instance, but I'm not sure what are the other use cases. I'm actually curious to hear.
Great. Thank you so much. I see all the questions coming into the chat. I promise we will leave time at the end for some of these questions. So don't worry, I'm not ignoring them. We will address them at the end of the session. Let's move on to our next topic around SKAN 4.0. The 4-digit source ID. And again, I'm handing it over to you, Roy, for a short explanation.
Great. Yeah, so source ID, this is a new and old parameter changed from campaign ID. Campaign ID was 2 digits that was introduced with SKAN, but now it has been extended to 4 digits with the change of the name to source ID. Which is huge. This is, I think, maybe underrated because the breakdown of campaign is extremely important. And we've seen that, advertisers were not able to get the campaign granularity and breakdown they needed. For example, geo was not part of SKAdNetwork. Creative ID, other dimensions that could make a huge difference. And now, thanks to extending the campaign parameters, there's going to be much more campaign breakdown. There are also fine prints here, depending on privacy thresholds, which we are not sure what they are. You're guaranteed to get the 2 digits, but number 3 and number 4 are not guaranteed. So it's still a huge advantage. I hope we'll get as much as we can from this new feature.
Thank you, Roy. I have a question for Supercell and Match Group. So going back to the challenges, and in light of this new change with the 4-digit source ID, how difficult did you find it not being able to have geo as a part of the measurement for SKAN, and how did you manage with that difficulty?
Okay, I would go first. Not having geo was challenging. I mean, I think there was a little bit hiccup early on when SKAdNetwork launched that people can still figure out the IP address. And I know people took advantage of it, and Apple quickly patched the bug, which is great. The way we be managing it is to really look at the cost data and combine that with in-store data. So from the cost data side, you do get the impressions by countries. So we did something, I would say pretty straightforward, that by looking at the impression data on how many of those impressions served in different geos, we then use that percentage to apply on the in-store number. The advantage of that is if you're gonna divide all the campaign by country, you're gonna get a lot of known value. This way, the UA buyers can set up the campaign however they want, and we just do post analysis for them. And it has worked out quite well.
Thanks, Emily.
From the match side, many of our apps are focused in North America. So we have, that advantage of being able to target North America, without having to, worry about the NGO being a real issue for us. For some of our brands that do have a presence in other geos outside of North America, we took the approach of actually targeting and assigning campaign slots to the geos that we wanted to test and invest in. It's obviously not as scalable, but the economics across various geos really vary for our business. And so that's the approach that, made sense for us. But like I said, fortunately, many of our brands where we've been really focused on testing into SKAN, we're able to just target North America.
Thanks, guys. Moving on to our next question. This one's for Matt. Do you have any ideas or suggestions for ad networks on how to implement this 4-digit source ID?
Sure. This is definitely good news. Dealing with that arbitrary 100 ID cap for campaign IDs has led across the industry to some, pretty interesting and sometimes tortured solutions for dealing with that limitation. And it's been costly for all of us. So, what we're doing and what my recommendation is the opportunity here, that we're hearing from advertisers is that this is just a way in which we can reintroduce some ability to cohort. The question is what are the cohorts that are really going to make a difference for advertisers, and how do we match the use of these additional digits with that optimally so that the optimization can take place that we just can't do today with SKAN. So that's the big opportunity. I think the big question is what's the right scheme for giving flexibility and more insight into cohorts. We talked about geo, but creative. And then, what other dimensions are there that we've really lost with the current version of SKAN that we might be able to get some meaningful signal back into? This is a major change. I would say it's non-trivial to build on top of what has already been introduced for SKAN and to do everything from, just kind of re-engineering the way that the ID solutions have been created, but then also it has performance model implications. It's a wide ranging change. It's probably going to take us all a while to fold it in and get on top of it. But I think that it's clearly an opportunity. And I think the biggest deal again is cohort visibility and reintroducing that in a way that we just don't have right now.
Thanks, Matt. Now a question to Supercell and Match Group. Would you like to have control over the assignment of the source IDs, or would you rather leave it up to the ad network?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, leaving to the ad network is fine, as long as it needs to back up to the creative level and the asset level. Because right now, everything is in a subset, and we don't get a lot of joy out of assigning source ID. So having ad network help out is actually not a problem, but we just need to, Matt was saying, back it up to the creative level that the UA buyers can optimize.
Thanks, Emily.
And I agree with Emily. I think, given the efforts underway already to model SKAN data by a lot of the ad networks, I think they've made it, they're in the best position to determine how to assign those 4 digits. And a lot of them have already been working very closely with our businesses. They understand us, they've been holding panels, and so I think they'll be in the best position.
Great, thank you, Caroline. Anything else to add before we move on to the next topic? Yes, no, great, okay. The next update that was announced as part of SKAN 4.0 is web to app. So I'm going to hand it over again to Roy for a short explanation.
Yeah, so yet another exciting feature update. Web to app is huge. Web to app was not supported by SKAdNetwork in previous versions. It is going to be supported now. It really varies. One, just like other things that I've mentioned, varies from one customer vertical to another, but also varies from different channels. So it's not a secret. Google search is going to be very affected by this for the better. So a lot of Google search traffic is web to app. This is now going to be measurable. And another thing that I think is going to be huge is the ability of advertisers, app developers, measuring traffic coming from their own websites and resulting in a download of the app. Needless to say, our OneLink will support both AppsFlyer attribution as well as SKAdNetwork attribution with this new feature by Apple. So again, really great news. I think it really increases the amount of observability and the amount of attributions that all of us as an industry can measure.
Thank you, Roy. My next question is for Match Group. So how significant is this update for you, and how excited are you about it?
Pretty excited. Match's app first brands were leveraging web to app flows prior to the deprecation of IDFA as a way to explore new acquisition opportunities. And it's definitely remained a key strategy for us that we run in tandem with SKAN. And it certainly helps us to bridge some of those attribution gaps that we experience, allows us to establish audience and creative learnings that we can then port over to our SKAN campaigns. And having SKAN attribution at for a web to app flow will be both beneficial to us as an incremental data point, but also for the ad networks. It's a much lower funnel signal that they're not currently receiving.
Thank you, Caroline. Anything else to add to that, or should we move on to the next question? No, great. This is another question for you. Would you want to see owned media, namely your website, as well as paid together on SKAdNetwork?
I think additional data points are always better. So the more that we have, I think that would be great. I don't think that that's key and critical to our current strategy, but it's always a nice to have.
Great. Thanks, Margaret. Well, that's it for our SKAN 4.0 topics that we're going to cover today. I have a wrap-up question that I'd like to ask each of you. In your kind of wildest dreams, what would you still hope to see in future updates from SKAdNetwork 5 or 6, or future versions of SKAdNetwork as Apple might announce them? Why don't you start, Roy?
Good question. I think it would be amazing. So Apple already introduced advertiser endpoint for copy of postbacks, and if they would be able to send unattributed, i.e. organic unattributed postbacks to that endpoint, this would be amazing. So this would give benchmark. This would give us the ability to actually understand unattributed, how they behaved, etc. This is really important, and we know advertisers are in need of that data.
Thanks, Roy. Margaret or Caroline?
One area or aspect that we've seen be incredibly challenging is just the impact to ad network algorithms. And so any sort of enhancement or better partnership that allows the ad networks to sort of like rebuild and get back closer to, you know, the efficiency and the effectiveness of their algorithms pre IDFA changes would be huge. And I think that that's probably like the next thing that we would hope for.
Thanks, Margaret. Matt?
Yeah, I would hope for that as well. No, plus one to Margaret's. We need more help. And the thing I would focus on that I still don't have great insight into what the changes are going to be and how this will evolve, but it's a really big part of exactly what Margaret's asking for is can we get ourselves to the point where we have visibility into the source app ID, the publisher environment, in a way that's still privacy sensitive, but is not as blunt an instrument as they've introduced so far. Like that is a very painful restriction. And we've seen some really interesting changes for the campaign ID. We've seen great, visibility introduced for conversion value and multiple postbacks, but we're still kind of waiting to understand if anything is going to evolve or change for source app ID and the publisher environment specifically. For me, that's still a big missing piece, and I'd like to see an iteration in that direction that helps us with more data.
Thank you. Caroline?
Yeah, echoing what has been said before me, but just more advertiser support. I think, one of the big challenges is the lack of guidance from Apple on how to use SKAN and when these new versions roll out. And so we're thankful to the MMPs and the knowledge sharing happening in the industry, but just more advertiser solutions and support would be wonderful.
Thanks, Caroline. And last but not least, Emily.
Well, if I have a magic wand and can have whatever I want, I would actually want to have revenue back on the campaign level. To be honest, like we don't want to know on an account level, because that, we really support the privacy-centric model, but the conversion value is challenging. I mean, we're creating these different value buckets to give us some ideas of like how these campaigns are doing within 24 hours. And I'm sure my data science team is going to have lots of fun doing the decoding and the bucketing of low, medium, high. But if there's a way we can have like an agree upon a KPI, including revenue and retention, that would be so magic. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Emily. I see some of you are also sharing in the chat what your wish list items are for future SKAdNetwork versions. Feel free to send them in there and share them with the rest of us. They're fascinating. We are going to dive into the Q&A next. So there's both the chat and the Q&A. Feel free to send your questions there. I'm going to start working my way down the list. First of all, Roy, you mentioned early on in the first section that SKAD 4.0 can help reduce the null rate. And I have Daniel Yaskovich asking for an explanation on that.
Yeah, definitely. What I assume is that some of the null values that were previously sent because privacy threshold was not met, since currently Apple decided to have another type of conversion values. There's fine grain, which is 0 to 63, and there's coarse grain, which is low, medium, or high. And since this new new type of conversion value has been introduced, what I assume is that a lot of the previously null values are going to be now reported as coarse grain. So what I assume is the previous threshold to either they can show conversion value or find conversion value or not remains, yet anything lower is now split to two. Things you can show low, medium, or high, and things you cannot show anything, i.e. null. So what I expect is that the subset of the previously null values is going to be currently low, medium, or high.
I have a follow-up on that question. Is low, medium, or high only tied to revenue? And how do you set the thresholds for low, medium, and high?
Yeah, that's great. So thresholds we do not control. Apple mystery, as we all know it by now. No documentation, no heads up, no nothing. Yet with regards to what you can map, that's totally up to us as an industry. Obviously, with our amazing conversion studio, this will allow all app developers configure whatever they want to either the fine grain or the low or the coarse grain, i.e. the low, medium, high.
The second and third postbacks also depend on whether the advertiser has passed the threshold or not, correct? Yes. Okay, thank you. I have a question from Thomas. Web to app measurement is only applicable if a user uses Safari, correct?
It was not specifically mentioned. We are, to be honest, we're not sure. Actually, I think it supports all browser, but I'm not 100% sure. Documentation has not been shared, and we can't test, we can't see, but we assume from the implementation, we think yes, TBD.
Okay, I have a question from Benjamin. What steps can mobile web-based publishers get ahead of and start working on with the upcoming release of web to app attribution?
So I will take it. It's a good question. I think at the moment, one, obviously, like mentioned before, SKAdNetwork is going to support web to app. So I don't know if you've previously got yourself very much familiar and, you know, if you within SKAdNetwork. So obviously I would recommend that if it hasn't been done before. Other than that, it's going to be pretty much out of the box for you. You know, it's just going to be supported. Ad networks will, I assume, quickly adopt, right? As soon as they can. This is huge for specifically, for example, Google search. And nothing else to be done on any other front. So,
Roy, do you think that existing one-link templates will just be updated to support SKAN in addition to the current flows?
Yes, exactly. No further implementation apparently will be required from advertisers. But it's important. One thing important that I also saw in one of the questions, if an SDK update will be required, the answer is yes. And this is not related to the web to app. This is actually related to SKAN 4. For the first time since SKAN 2.0 was introduced, now advertiser apps are required to update to SKAN 4. This was not required before. Now it is going to be required. So obviously it just means updating AppsFlyer SDK, but it's important to note that.
We have a question from Pavel who asked if the AppsFlyer KB articles will be updated with the changes explained. Once we have the documentation from Apple, we'll be able to reflect that in our documentation as well. So that's to answer that question. We have a couple questions here. We have a question about mixed media modeling. And if we have any use cases around that. I'm not sure if we have anything to share on that. Roy, maybe? Do you have any? No?
I think actually it's better to ask the other panelists what they think about MMM from their experience. I think this would be interesting. Matt, perhaps. So,
I have to say, mixed media modeling have been thrown around a lot since SKAdNetwork. And it is quite challenging because you don't get all these data. For example, if you have like a very thriving YouTube channels, you don't get that data back that easily. And if you have influencers that push marketing for you, you also don't get those data back easily. So to get all these offline data, it's not as easy as some of the articles has indicated. So this remains a challenge for us.
Thank you, Emily. We have a lot of love in the chat for web to app, and a lot of excitement around that. I have some questions, technical questions about whether an SDK update will be required to support the new 4.0 challenges. I would say most likely, but again, we're waiting for more information before we can share everything with you officially. SKAN 4 is expected to be released later this year. We don't have an exact date yet. Hopefully soon we'll have more information. Pravin shared that their future SKAN wish list includes encrypted IDFAs for SKAN 5.0. So thank you for sharing that information back with us. Question from Raul. Absolute revenue can't be recorded for global clients. If you have time, please discuss this. What's the best solution for opt-out users who are now close to 90%?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
Raul, do you want to send a clarification in the chat and we'll try to address it? In the meantime, we'll tackle the next one. Let me see. Could you please cover more about purchase or subscription tracking? Our app includes monthly subscriptions, and currently we are running ads for app installs based on our LTV. Is there a way to track purchase conversion rate by advertising platform? Is there actually a way to run campaigns for in-app purchases and get at least approximate data? That's from Emils.
Yeah, so I think this is great. This is a perfect example of how SKAN 4 could really benefit to you guys, because you will get, assuming you map, for example, high value of the third post back, you can map it to subscription. And assuming a user does a subscription, you are 100% guaranteed, not 100, is leaving null values aside, but you are likely to get this conversion back to you, that X amount of users from this campaign converted to subscription, something that you and other app developers with subscription apps were not able to do. So this is a major improvement for you guys. You will be able to measure that now.
Thanks. Raul, send a clarification. Revenue for users who opt out. SKAN model is indicative, but for global clients like Adidas, how to estimate revenue generated by app users?
Oh, I think, SKAdNetwork SKAdNetwork measures users whether they opted out or not. And I'm not sure if you're asking about if there's a confusion with regards to opt-out users or not. And I'm not sure if you're asking about this or just getting revenue in better granularity, in better accuracy than what can be provided with SKAdNetwork. And the answer is yes. Actually, us at AppsFlyer are working on solutions that can enrich revenue LTV provided by SKAN by inputs of consented users, probabilistic attribution, SKAdNetwork, day one of SKAdNetwork, etc. Using all of these signals in order to help you understand a better LTV attribution.
Thank you, Roy.
Okay.
We have a question here from David. I just want to make sure, David, that I understand that you're referring, David Altar. Is this a question regarding the privacy threshold specifically? If you don't mind typing your answer so that we'll know how to address it. In the meantime, I'm checking for a new. I got asked again about when SKAN 4 will be released towards the end of the year. I know there's a lot of excitement and a lot of wonder, and that's what Apple announced at WWDC. Yes. So David's question has to do with the privacy threshold. So basically he's asking, how can it be that TikTok SRN with fewer installs, such as 40 a day, does receive iOS in-app events, while Meta SRN doesn't receive with 100 daily installs? And I think this refers basically to the inner workings of the privacy threshold system by Apple. And it's an algorithm that we're not privy to. So it's got its own workings and its own logic.
We do have a theory. It really depends. And it really depends on the ad network, because what essentially it depends right now with SKAN 2.0, mostly on number of campaign IDs used. And we know Meta is using all of the 100 campaigns because they're doing a lot of testing. And the second one is publishers. How many, depending on how many publishers you have, really depends on what will happen with the conversion value, and whether the privacy threshold passes or not. And actually, our theory, according to the data that we saw, is that actually more publishers can guarantee you better for you to pass privacy threshold with less installs. This is kind of counterintuitive, but one, it's supported by data, and two, the theory is that they will drop the source app ID if there are fewer installs per source app ID, but they will then not drop the conversion value. So this is how it goes.
I think this should also tackle Hannah's question earlier on. She asked about the minimum installs needed to meet the privacy threshold. So I hope that answered your questions.
Just to share from our perspective on this as well, I think Roy is exactly right. The distribution of the campaign IDs is a really big deal with respect to differences or fluctuations you see in hitting that privacy threshold. Publisher plays into it as well. We've absolutely seen that. We've also seen stuff we can't explain. So it can be a bit mysterious from advertiser to advertiser, to where that privacy threshold it just seems different. So yeah, I think if you're trying to really account for it, the first thing to look at is exactly what Roy said, the campaign ID strategy and the publisher strategy. But there is a certain point where you just don't know exactly why there are deviations.
Thanks, Matt. Any final questions before we kind of move on to closing remarks? I'm scanning through again to make sure. All right. Love to hear a final closing from each of you. Just moving forward, we talked about your wish list items for SKAN 5, 6, and beyond. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Margaret, Matt, Caroline, Emily. Is there anything you'd like to add before we say goodbye to our lovely attendees and panelists?
I have one thing that, kind of out of the scope of this webinar, but I think, all the voices that came up from this session, and I'd like to double down on things that our panelists said here, and because I've kind of went into Privacy Sandbox by Google, and I think it answers a lot of what our panelists actually requested here. So I think this is also going to be an exciting time. There's still time for that, but we'd be happy to elaborate on that, maybe on a different webinar, but excited for what's to come.
Yeah, I want to echo what Roy said. I think to be the first to do anything is so incredibly difficult. And of course, there's tensions around SKAdNetwork when it was first launched. But you think about where the industry is like heading and what the consumer really want, like with GDPR and all the changes like CCPA, this is actually really good for consumers. And, Apple is actively developing tools and services to give us more signals. No value sucks, but still it's some value. You still can get the install number. That's still something for you to optimize. So all the changes is very positive. So we are very excited about it.
Thanks, Emily. Margaret or Caroline?
I definitely agree, with the group. in terms of, like the future. And we've really just been trying to embrace the data that we are able to get. And then also, like I mentioned before, leveraging our learnings and how we approached measurement of other non-trackable media, like out of home radio streaming. We're really like leaning in that direction too, in terms of taking what we can get from SKAN and then using that as a data point and layering it on top of other types of measurement, whether it's through survey or incrementality testing. And that's how we're sort of thinking about putting all the puzzle pieces together to create a more complete picture.
Thanks, Margaret. I've shared a link in the chat with all of you. The source for a lot of the stats we shared at the top of the hour in the iOS trivia is from a AppsFlyer report called ATT 1 Year On. So if you're interested in reading more, you can feel free to hop on over there and take a look at some of our interesting data. Thank you all for joining today. The recording will be shared with those who attended and probably in the next few days. Wishing you all a great rest of your day, afternoon, or evening. And that's it for now. Goodbye.